Guys, Creative Katie here. Welcome to my channel and an art journal tutorial. This is part of my napkin series. I absolutely love this page. So I'm starting with the napkin from NINNYSNAPKINS.com, and links can be found in the description box below. I am using a little piece of painter's tape on the corner to help get the plies, the excess plies, off. You want to be sure to remove those before you do any decoupaging. Sometimes like on this one, it gives you a little bit of a fight and it wasn't coming off exactly clean, but most times it's pretty easy. You just have to persist. And I would say 95% of the time there are two excess plies. Save these plies in your stash because you can use them, and I hope to be doing more. So I'm working in my 7x10 Canson mixed media journal. I love using this size, and I've always used this brand. I find it works really well. I gesso many of the pages to begin with, but not always. And I find it stands up well to all the stuff that I throw at it. So I've played a little bit, placing the napkin over top of the book that I'm using, the size to get the size, and I'm kind of guesstimating right now how much of this napkin or what parts of this napkin I want to do. So now I'm using a liner brush and I'm dipping that in water, very little water, and I'm what I call water cutting the daisies out. And I get as close as I can. It's just a personal preference. Some people leave a lot more of the napkin around. Again, personal preference. So now that I have that out, I'm editing it. And that's the joy with napkins because you can cut out what you don't want, you can piece in pieces that you do, and come up with your own composition using the beautiful, beautiful art that you can get in some of the napkins. Now, in this case, I'm using the napkin here as the focal image, and that's great for those of us who lack drawing skills or lack confidence in their drawing skills. And we're going to use the napkin here as a guide for my painting. Now the little bits that are left just go in a stash and I can use those on other pages, either as a focal image or as a collage item. At the very least, it adds texture. So here I'm just getting a little bit more precise now that I have it roughly done. I'm just pulling off some of the elements that I do not want. And again, playing with how do I want to set this up? Do I want it to go this way or do I want it to go this orientation? Loving the word Shasta Daisy on there, so I want to keep it. There's that kind of old vintage scroll work in parts of the napkin in between the flowers. So I grabbed the stencil called scroll work and my text stamp because I'm thinking that is a good combination. I'm playing with the motifs using the napkin and the design elements of the napkin as the jump off start. Now using this scroll work stencil, and this is the size 6, and you can also get many of the 6-inch stencils at Ninny's Napkins, TCW ones. I am applying thick gesso through the stencil. And I decided that I'm going to cover the entire background with this stencil, even where I'm going to be decoupaging down the daisy napkin. I love using the gesso through the stencil. You don't necessarily get a perfect imprint of it, so it's not something that would work if you wanted it to be the focal image, but it gives just the right amount of texture. It dries very quickly. And just a reminder, if you don't already follow me, go to Instagram and follow me on Instagram at Creative Katie. Also join my art journaling mixed media Facebook group, Art Journaling and Mixed Media Creations. So after that dries, I'm going to decoupage the napkin down now. I want to keep the daisies, they're white. I don't want them to be colorized by what I'm going to be putting on the background. So I'm putting my Liquitex Basics Fluid Matte Medium. It is my favorite thing to use when I'm decoupaging. That being said, there are many products out there that I have not used, so use what works for you. Loving how the texture of the model or the gesso in the background is pushing up between the daisies and gives a pattern to the daisy petals. Now I'm just adding a little bit of white gesso, smudging the lines between the napkin and the page, kind of blurring any, sometimes there was a hard edge or a darker color that I didn't want there. This will also prepare the page for what I'm going to do when I start colorizing the page. I didn't want any raw page there because it would take the color differently. And I'm just giving that a dry before I start adding color. Now, instead of reaching for my acrylic paints, I grab these color bursts. There's yellow oxide, sepia, there's a green, and I mix them with a little bit of water in the palette. I felt I had a little bit more control, so now I'm just dripping them on here. They're very strongly pigmented, and I want to get it into the nooks and crannies of all that wonderful texture that we created by pushing the gesso, the thick gesso, through that beautiful scrollwork stencil. Now, playing with pigment powders in any way is something fairly, it's not new to me, but I don't do a lot of it because I've never built up the skill. So I'm determined that I'm going to keep bringing out, watercolors and acrylic inks and things like that, my Starburst, my Lindy Starburst, and playing with them because only as I play with them and experiment with them am I going to figure out how to use them. So when you try a new product the first time, expect that it's not going to go 100%. You may have to play with it. So I find that I'm doing a bit of a dance here. I'm adding color, I'm taking off color with a baby wipe. I'm adding, you get the unexpected. It doesn't necessarily go where you want. And of course, because I'm used to acrylics and the look and the feel of acrylic paints, this is just feeling a little odd to me. But my goal here is to get the brown, yellow, green background, all those colors that are in that napkin in the background. So it looks like these daisies are closer up and behind them is just this field of daisies with the same colors. That's kind of the look I'm going for. So I'm doing a little bit of a dance here, adding color, taking it off, adding color, taking it off. I'm working in some white gesso to mute the colors and get some different tones. Adding water to get the pigments to flow a little bit more, to dilute if it's too dark some places. Bent up some pages. I am loving the look. The texture on the daisies is absolutely gorgeous. That stencil coming through, it makes them just, oh yum. There are no words. So I'm adding and I'm drying and I'm adding, and it's kind of muted right now. And since I'm not sure what I want to do on the background, I'm just moving to the daisies. And I grabbed a brown brush and I'm getting white gesso and I'm putting it on, kind of dipping the brush in the white gesso, and there's lots on the brush, and just filling in the petals of the daisy, getting that painterly effect. I'm using the art of the napkin as my guide. And you can see right now, you can see that texture underneath, and I absolutely love how this is turning out. This was making me very, very, very happy. And, I'm not trying to be too precise. I'm trying to leave spaces in between the petals, overlapping, how one of those daisies is overlapping the other one, preserving, again, the art, but painting over it. And elongating some of the petals as I see fit, bringing it into where I've got some of that, the color or the background, and overlapping it so that there's not that cut off edge. I'd never done a daisy. I did an echinacea from using a free printable and following it. So when you're looking at your napkins, when you're going through Ninny's napkins and picking and you think, oh, that might be a focal point, this is something you can do with any kind of focal point, especially flowers, because you're making kind of an abstract. It's not, I don't want it to look like a picture. I want it, very painterly. But I'm loving how this works. And I do go over the petals a couple times with more gesso till I get the look that I like. Adding the white gesso is also brightening up these daisies. And really drawing your eye because your eye is drawn to the white, what is the brightest on the page. And here I'm coming in with another layer. And I'm not necessarily trying to cover everything exactly. So you're getting some different tones. Some are whiter and brighter than other parts of the daisy, just like it would be in nature with the shadows. Extremely happy with that. Now I'm grabbing some of my Liquitex Basics um, paint and a makeup sponge, and I'm putting some of that brown, I think it's burnt umber, on the makeup sponge and very lightly rubbing it over all that texture. And I really want to bring up that scroll work stenciling. Whereas underneath the daisies and in the napkin, it's very subtle, but it's still there. Here I want to bring it up. I want to actually see that pattern. So I rub it with the burnt umber and then I come back and I do with black as well, a little less. And there, I wasn't sure that was on the video, but there's the black. And I'm just putting just a little bit, touching here and there. I don't even want to try to get every part of it. But you can see how that just makes that stenciling forward. And I'm edging with the brown, with the black as well. And I'm using some shading around this outline of the page, get along that tape mark with the angle brush. Links to the stencils and the napkins and everything can be found in the description box below. I've now started listing in my Amazon store the commonly used things that you see me using all the time. Here I'm adding a little bit more of the green and the yellow. I just want to add a little bit more color to the background. Again, matching it to the feel of the napkin. And then there's this part of this napkin here that I hadn't done any paint to it, and it looks funny. And while I want that script that says Shasta Daisy to show, I just wanted to colorize it so it looked a little bit more like the background I created. Just putting a little bit of white on some high points, just a little bit of highlights. And then I'm adding a little bit of gold. Now I'm painting in the center of the flowers. I believe I have yellow oxide acrylic paint, and I'm just kind of stippling it on with the brush because I want that texture. So it's an old ratty brush. And I'm doing a little bit of brown and a little bit of the iron or the yellow oxide. Then I decided I'm going to use the floating acrylic technique and shade some of those petals to make them stand out. And in the end, I really love the final. I think I would have liked to, if I'm do this one again, and I very likely will, either as a journal cover or on a canvas, I might not do this part. But again, that's personal preference. And now that I've tried it, I know. So again, that's one of the reasons I do things in an art journal. It's kind of like my dry run. It's kind of my practice rehearsal. I figure things out and I can try and experiment and then moving forward, do something. Using a stylus, I'm dotting this with gold and brown and the yellow oxide. And so this is giving a really wonderful textural element to the centers of these daisies. In real life, it just looks spectacular. So I dip it in the paint, the gold, the yellow, the brown, and then kind of mix it on the center. There I'm adding the gold after it dries. Just a little bit of bling because I remember I rubbed it on the scrollwork stencil in the background. So we have it in a couple places. And because I'm really globbing it on thickly, it is giving huge amount of texture to those centers of those daisies. And then I'm splattering with gold. And that looks great on the background and it looks great on top of the daisies as well, on the white of the daisies. I think I splatter with a little bit of the brown. I had the burnt umber there. I added water and I'm just coming in and painting. Taking off the painter's tape that keeps my dry edge. Went into my Down the Garden Path sentiment pack and picked the one all flowers must grow through dirt. But the white just looked a little too stark. I didn't want this to be the focal point. So I'm taking the brown and the black and I'm just getting rid of that stark whiteness and making it work. We all have to go through some hardships to get to the other side, even flowers. Taking the makeup sponge with a mixture of black and burnt umber just to edge them a little bit. Again, grunge them up, get rid of the white edge. And I'm going to use my Liquitex matte fluid medium to glue them down. Now, underneath there, remember, I use those pigment powders. They are water soluble. So I don't want to put wet medium. I don't want to brush that wet medium onto my background. So I'm I'm using gel medium here because it's not liquid on the back of the sentiment and then pressing it down and then going very lightly over top, trying very hard not to touch any of that background because it'll reactivate it and I might not like the effect that I get. So it's not that you can't use water soluble products, it's just that when you do, what you do later changes. Now I'm putting out some gold and I just am using the floating acrylic technique to put a little bit of gold on the petals of the daisies. Now you can't really see how wonderful that looks on camera, but it just adds, oh, it just makes these really pop. Especially if this was a canvas, it would just really, really shine. The gold just makes it look that much more special. Now I chose not to paint out the leaves. You might decide to do the painterly effect on the leaves as well. There you can see a little bit of how that gold looks. So the video is almost done here. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you like the finished product as much as I do. Close-ups are coming. Give me a thumbs up. Follow me on Instagram. Share this video with your creative friends. And as always, get creative.